So I think it's fair to say that I've done some pretty stupid things on this channel. I mean, what sort of idiot drives 500 laps around Monaco on a controller? However, I'm always trying to do something more crazy, and that's why in this video I'm going to try and one-up that by trying to set a lap time faster than the top 50% of the world around Monza, but driving in the opposite direction. So I'm going to be doing this challenge around Monza because I genuinely don't think that I've got the brain power to take more than 15 corners backwards, and the time that I've got to beat is a 1 minute 21.030. Is this actually possible? Well, I'm recording this intro before I've even driven a lap backwards yet, so I've actually got no idea. Right, so usually when I do these time trial challenges, I quickly cut down the first lap because everybody knows the track that I'm driving on and I'm just getting up to speed. However, because this video is just so different from anything that I've ever done before, we're going to go through this entire first lap. And you're about to watch me be just so confused as I try and figure out what lines to take, where to brake, and more importantly, trying to stay on the track, which as you're about to see, didn't exactly go to plan. To be fair, I think on every time trial challenge I've ever done, I've either spun or crashed in the first lap, so it's no surprise that I did just that whilst driving backwards. Anyway, it's now time for the two Lesmos. First up is Lesmo 2, which honestly I took pretty well, and after this, going through Lesmo 1, sadly, I just didn't brake at the right time. But thankfully this time I didn't spin, so we're now coming up to what is the penultimate chicane on this backwards track. And this time I did the opposite of the Lesmos. Through the first part I missed the apex by an absolute mile, but then I took the final corner of this chicane perfectly. And all that was left on this lap was the final chicane, which I knew was going to be so difficult to get right. To be honest, my main problem coming into this final chicane was that I didn't know where to brake, and this was because I was carrying so much speed and this chicane is so tight. However, looking back, for a first lap I actually took these two corners pretty well, and I was definitely very cautious, but let's be honest, we all expected that. Now it's time for the run up to the finish line, and I was hoping to be in the range of 1 minute and 45 seconds, considering that I had a crash and spin earlier in the lap. And that is exactly what it was. I was 21.44 seconds off the overall goal, but I knew that I would knock off some of that time so quickly. So we're now on to what will be my next improvement, and we're coming up to a sky where, as you may remember, I made a massive mistake on my previous lap. Unfortunately for me, going through this backward section of corners, I didn't make any mistake, and I definitely gained loads of time through here because, to be honest, I actually took this section of corners pretty well. And we're now going to speed up to the Lesmo where I also made a mistake on the previous lap. Sadly, going through this Lesmo, I carried way too high minimum speed again, and the second that I touched the grass, I was sent into a huge spin, which I tried to recover as quick as possible. Luckily, this was only my second lap, so we have ages to improve, and once again, we're going to speed this lap all the way up to the finish line. So as you're about to see, from this lap alone, I've gained comfortably over 11 seconds, and my next goal was to try and take the Lesmos properly. So taking this corner correctly definitely should not have taken as long as it did, but as we go through this Lesmo, thankfully for the first time this challenge, I finally didn't make a mistake. To be honest, I didn't even take it that well, but as you're about to see, just taking this corner correctly alone gave me my first lap time that was below 1 minute and 28 seconds. And with every improvement, I was just getting so much closer to the overall goal. So now that we've got the massive improvements out of the way, you've probably noticed that because I'm driving backwards, there's obviously not a delta feature that you get when you normally drive in the right way. So what we're going to do is take the sectors from the normal way around the track and reverse them to the backwards lap and use this to see how much I've improved per lap. And just so that you get an idea of how I was driving at this point, we're going to go through this whole lap and start measuring the sector times. So of course, first up is parabolica, and as you can tell, I hadn't really figured out how to take that corner yet, but you will soon find out how much better that was compared to my previous personal best. After this was a Ascari, but this time in reverse, and for the first time in this challenge I felt like I had nailed what was now the first sector, as I'd gained a huge 4 seconds from just 4 corners. So this was obviously brilliant, but to be fair, I did expect it because of how bad I took those 4 corners previously. However, the reason that it did become an improvement was because I took the second and third sectors so well. So if I really wanted to maintain this gain, I needed to keep driving at a high level because I knew that this was an opportunity to get way closer to the overall goal. After this, it was the two Lesmos, which I actually took really well, so I definitely had gained some time through there. However, recently I had struggled with hooking up this penultimate chicane, and I just had an absolute disaster going through these two corners. And as we go through this second sector split, from this mistake alone, I had lost an entire second, and I was just so frustrated. But to be honest, as I've previously mentioned, I did expect to lose time in the second and third sector, just not as much as I did end up losing. Moving on, it's now time for the final chicane, and this is also so tricky to navigate. However, if I didn't have a slight wobble on the exit of these two corners, I probably would have taken it absolutely perfectly. So it's now time for the finish line, and I obviously knew that this was going to be a massive bit of progress, and that's exactly what it was. And this is because I'd set my first lap time in this challenge under 1 minute and 25 seconds, and also for the first time in this challenge I was under 4 seconds away from the lap time that I had been aiming for. And not long after this, I was about to make another bit of progress. So a few failed laps have passed since my last improvement, and looking back, the difference in how I took parabolica is massive because I clearly have a way better understanding of this corner. And we're going to see how much time I've gained from this by the time we reach the end of this first sector. To be honest, as we go through Ascari, I didn't even take it that well, but that clearly did not matter because by the time we get to the end of the first sector split, I'd gained 0.66 seconds, and this was huge. And I knew there was still time to find in the second sector, especially going through the penultimate chicane. But before that was the Lesmos, and I took them pretty well. However, I was just desperate to take this chicane correctly. Coming into these corners, I broke slightly earlier than usual, and I just absolutely nailed them, and this gained me another 3/10 by the second sector split. And this meant that I was on for another second worth of progress by the end of this lap, especially with the fact that I was going through this penultimate straight and I was still gaining time because I had such a good exit. But here is where I really messed up this lap. Before the final chicane, I stupidly ran along the grass and I lacked so much grip going through these final two corners, and I probably lost about 4/10 worth of possible progress. However, I still knew that I was on for a massive gain, and in the end I improved by 1.1 seconds, and although I was delighted with this, I knew that this challenge was definitely completable because of how much time there was to find. So of course my next bit of progress was going to be found in the final chicane, but just for reference, in this lap I was only marginally down to my previous personal best after a pretty average penultimate chicane. Moving on, we'll speed up to the final chicane, and I knew that this was where I had to make this lap count. To be honest, I was quite cautious going through these final two corners, however I knew that I would still be making a lot of progress, and that's exactly what happened. By the time we reached the finish line, this improvement would be worth 0.8 of a second, and I was now under 2 seconds away from the overall goal. And after this I made 3 very quick improvements that brought me within 1.1 seconds away from the lap time that I was aiming for. However, as you're about to see, I was still making some very silly mistakes, and this was giving me the motivation to push on because I knew that I could find even more time. So I've got no idea what I was doing going across the grass here, but not long after these improvements I was about to set such a good lap time. Going through Ascari, I didn't actually have that good of an entrance into that section of corners, but I carried great minimum speed, and as we go through the first sector split I was already 3.5 up. So next up is the Lesmos, and along with the final chicane, these are the most important corners on this entire backwards track. Through what is now the first Lesmo, I had a very decent run, and then a very similar level corner going through the second Lesmo. However, it's now time for the dreaded penultimate chicane, and I was just so committed through here, which led to me missing the apex of the third from final corner on this lap. But to be fair, I still had a good exit leaving here, and I was now half a second up. Obviously this wasn't going to be the lap to complete the challenge, but if I could keep improving on this lap I would make a massive step in the right direction. And that is exactly what I did, because going into the final chicane I was also really committed. I had a slight wobble going through it and on the exit, but that didn't really matter because as you're going to see, as we go up to the line I was about to make a massive bit of progress. In the end I made around 7/10 worth of progress. I finally set a lap time that was under 1 second away from my overall goal, but this is where I realised that I needed an absolutely massive lap if I really wanted to complete this challenge.
This is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
I had done it. In the end, I beat the overall goal of trying to set a lap time faster than the top 50% of the world backwards around Monza by exactly 0.08 of a second. And if I'm totally honest with you lot, I've got no idea because I almost bottled it in that final chicane because I was so nervous going into it because I knew that I was on a good lap. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe as we're so close to 15,000 subscribers, and I'll see you all next week.